Let's start with Todd's BDN. I think that's the place we need to start. So, our first featured review is the Alto Knights, and it's a BDN. So that means Todd has to start. Todd, what'd you think?
All right, well, this is directed by Oscar winner Barry Levinson, and it tells the story of once friends, eventual rival mob bosses Vito Genovese and Frank Costello, both played by Robert De Niro. Costello is the boss with political pull. Genovese is the more erratic one, the classic mobster, the violent one who wants his power back. And then one of his henchmen, Vincent, played by Carlsmo Jarvis, he was from Calm with Horses, if you recognize his face. He attempts to kill Costello, but he miraculously survives. And this starts a wildfire of investigation, not only into that incident, but into the families overall. The movie has some like Godfather 2 type of scenes in front of Congress. It has some Goodfellas type voiceover narrated by Costello. And it has some commentary on mob life in the vein of The Irishman. It's like a mix of all these like classics and done by a director who turned one of those very traditional mob movies into a Best Picture nominee over 30 years ago. The pedigree is there. The execution is a little bit more uneven, though. I'd heard Bob at one point in an interview say that this is one of the performances he's most proud of in his career. This was like years ago when he actually shot this. And I could see why he would say that, because he does a ton of work in this, and there's prosthetics, there's vocal changes, stuff he hasn't done in like decades. And he's amazing as Vito. Like Costello, he could do in his sleep, but it's Vito is like almost Oscar nomination worthy stuff. Like it's like an extended version of his character in American Hustle, and the makeup work is fantastic. It basically turns him into Joe Pesci. That has to be the reason why he didn't play both roles, or why he has playing both roles, because it's the most like Joe Pesci role I've ever seen. His wife, played by Catherine Narducci, she even does like the Mona Lisa Vito voice while they're in court. It's like I know Pesci's really old. He probably is like officially done acting, but I mean he probably could have played that role too. But it's written by Nicholas Pileggi, who wrote Casino and he wrote Goodfellas, and he obviously knows how to write for De Niro because he fits into these characters so well. The movie though plays like sort of like a modern Spielberg movie. It's like a good story. It should have stakes, but it feels slight, kind of like Bridge of Spies or Lincoln or Warhorse. It feels like retread, a little bit inconsequential, even though what's happening is kind of big. And I think Bob actually should have directed this. Like his two directorial efforts, The Good Shepherd and A Bronx Tale, could have like come together as a nice blueprint for this movie. But Levinson is so old and he's like out of touch. Like he hasn't made a great movie in at least 15 years. Some would argue 30 years. I don't know when the last like actually official great movie of Barry Levinson was. It hits like similar beats to like Many Saints of Newark and stuff. Michael Rispoli is actually in this, and he actually gets a pretty important role, which is kind of interesting. The editing is bad. It's a little like all over the place initially, but then it slowly is building to something that seems important, but ends up being kind of a dud. We're at the point now where we could take all of De Niro's mob movies and basically tell the entire history of the mafia, and I kind of like that. I want to see like a supercut, like in like chronological order of all those movies. It's I don't know. I was interested in the movie. I just wasn't as into it as I would have liked to be. I'm at a slight thumbs down. I'm at 2.5 stars on this, which puts it BDN number 54 between Everybody's Fine and The Family, which seems appropriate.
All right, Zach, where are you at?
Okay, so from the director of Bugsy, from the writer of Goodfellas, from the star of Casino, channeling the spirit, though, of John Travolta's Gotti. This movie was awful.
Have you seen Gotti?
Of course not. But I read the online haters of it. But this movie, okay, so this movie was an interesting experience. Todd texted me beforehand, and I want to read his text because it was a great text. He said, with movies the profile of Alto Knights, the reviews don't even matter a bit, which kind of makes you wonder why we're even reviewing it. But I think I see his point. And if you just kind of sit back and enjoy it, it can be an enjoyable experience. I think it's kind of like how the Golden Globes classified The Martian as a comedy. I think if you classify this movie as a comedy, it would work, because Bob is basically doing his own version of Nutty Professor to the Clumps, Although I really wish he could have played the wives too. I mean, that would have really would have brought it full circle. This movie is strange. It's heavy-handed. There is a ton of dialogue in it. I mean, chops the actors for having to memorize all that dialogue, although a lot of it is in the voiceover that Bob is delivering to us for some reason from different locations. He's giving us like a slideshow of his life, and then he's talking to us on a bench. Who are you talking to, Bob? Oh, I'm the only one here. Okay. This movie is like really dull and really uninteresting for long stretches, but it's fascinating in how misguided it is. I don't know why Bob is playing two people. I've never seen a movie make the mob look this boring. I mean, it's kind of like how The Irishman was, I heard you paint houses. This is like, I heard you watch paint dry. Like, that's this movie. By the way, I got that from someone. That wasn't me. The prosthetics are whatever. I mean, yeah, he's doing like Joe Pesci for some reason. I'm not really sure why. This is like Kirk Lazarus type territory. And then it's also like Tommy Wiseau territory. Did they know they were making a movie this bad? I kind of feel like they didn't, but if they had leaned into it a little bit, maybe the movie would have been a little bit more fun. I don't know. There's literally a scene where Bob is watching the TV and Little Richard is on, and he says, I can't believe that people listen to this. And then Debra Messing says, well, the times they are a-changing. I mean, come on. Like, this is laughably bad dialogue. The intercut assassination attempt sequences are just, I mean, we were doing that 50 years ago. Okay, this is like the Godfather baptism scene. I thought that was novel maybe 50 years ago. It's not really novel today. I think this movie channels the spirit of it. Has the same youthful energy as a Joe Biden and Donald Trump presidential debate. This movie has an average age of 127 years. I read that on IMDb. It's like a 2-hour failed SNL high concept sketch. And it's a reminder that the SNL sketches need to be 2 minutes long. I don't, it's fascinating because, the last 30 minutes are something special. Okay. When you get the old 80-year-old octogenarian mob bosses in upstate New York in their cars running around the fields, that shit's kind of funny. All right. I was kind of into that. Okay. I love the guy holding the lobster. He's like, the goblet with the shrimp cocktail in it. I love that. And I love the tractor. I mean, that was great. Okay. That to me was like, really, really fun stuff. There was a review that I read of Sallow, which maybe I'll mention later in this podcast, that said that the victims in Sallow are subjected to humiliation, rape, abuse, torture, unwelcome pansexuality, shit, blood, long stories, sadomasochism, and finally death. And that's the way I feel about this movie. That's what I feel like I was subjected to, especially the long stories part. This is a 1-star movie. I can't deny, though, that it is sort of a fun watch, but I think it's more fun to look at the IMDb comments for than actually to watch the movie. But yes, it was something. I give it chops for its chutzpah. I mean, it was doing something.
For props. This is the second time you said that. It's props.
What did I say? I said props, didn't I?
You said chops. You said chops 3 times now.
Well, I give the movie props and chops.
Give it props for its chops. All right. We're thrice declined on this, but I'm almost perfectly in lockstep with Todd. I'm at 2.5 stars. There's some good stuff in this, and there's some weird stuff in it. I think it's obvious that this was written by the same person who wrote Casino. I just watched Casino for the first time not that long ago, and this feels like retirement home Casino. Because it's told the same way with the constant voiceover and everything going on around it. It's the exact same dynamic between your two lead characters. It's just instead of De Niro and Pesci, it's De Niro and De Niro pretending to be Pesci. And best friends from growing up, and now they're at odds with each other. And how's it going to turn out? And with an attempt taken on one of their lives by the hot-headed one. I mean, this is beat for beat Casino, just retirement home. And how do you go from having like 16-year-old kids playing these two characters, and then Vito goes to prison for 15 years, and when they come out, it's De Niro and De Niro looking like they're 75 or 80, and they're that for the next 15 years. No, I don't. I mean, they look the same, unless it's De Niro doing his voiceover stuff. They look the same. What's with when was the last time you saw a truly effective slow fade to black in a movie? Levinson does it like 10 times in this.
He's old. He should have been out of the game years ago.
He can't go home because he hates his wife.
What was that movie we watched that he directed with Ben Foster? Like, I mean, that was like, is that the only movie he's done in like the last 10 years? Or that the Survivor? So,
the World War II one.
The Survivor, yeah, he did do that.
I mean, he just does TV stuff now, pretty much. Like, What Just Happened, I really liked. That one wasn't popular. All right, it will keep going, Terry. Sorry.
Anyways, I'm giving it 2.5. There is some interesting stuff going on. All right, another thing I don't like about it, for the most part, it's an engaging movie, and I enjoyed it. There was just some weird stuff in it. Like, I mean, the trailer mentions how this is the story of the man who took down the mob. And then they try to play it. Then they try to play it like it's the big twist ending. Like I figured this was gonna be like Act 2. You were gonna find out that this is how it turns out. No, we're saving it for the end. Oh, spoiler alert! He's in on it. Like
I don't know what his plan was though. That's what's so interesting. It's like I don't think that's how he designed it to go down. But I don't know.
Well, guess what? You know why the mob collapsed? Was because of drugs. We've never seen that in a mob movie before. No, this was the first movie to show that drugs really led to the decline of the mob. Very, very original thinking there.
My favorite part of the movie was watching the mobsters watching the hearing. Because like De Niro is like he's more into it than he was the Eagles in Silver Linings Playbook. Like he's like, take the fifth, come on, what are you doing? Like screaming at his TV. That scene was awesome, and it was pretty tense to watch because I was just like, how is he going to get out of that? Like that line of questioning is completely screwing him. That was a great scene.
I like the scene with him and the dog in the knitted sweaters when he's having the meetings with the other gangsters on the bench. That was terrific. And I like that he got into a career with flowers, because isn't that his fake career in Meet the Parents? Isn't he also into flowers?
Oh, yes.
Good connection there. But yeah,
see, what's interesting about this, like, because it does tell a long spanning, like, true story about the mob, but like they mention people that are important. Like they mention Capone, they mention Lucky, who was like a peer of Costello. And like they're not in the movie. Like if they added a couple more characters, it would have been a 3-hour movie, and maybe it would have actually added a little bit more context to what we're doing. But as it is, it pretty much a focused movie that we've seen 100 times. Just like, I mean, it's done fine.
Yeah. Worth right to find.
This has 39% on Rotten Tomatoes, which to me feels high, and I'm wondering if people see the camp value in it. But do you know the last? See, Terry, you said you like the fade to black. I believe the last line of this movie, spoiler alert a little bit, is De Niro says, "Well, that's it," and the movie ends. I mean, that's how you're going to end the movie. Well, that's it. I think if this movie was a little bit more rewatchable, with 200-pound, 80-year-old men running in the Catskills or the whatever, upstate New York in the farm country, that's a positive movie. That's a thrice approved movie. But that was only in the last 30 minutes of this movie.
You didn't like Michael Rispoli and Cosmo Jarvis? Like their characters were fun.
I was nice seeing Michael Rispoli. It was nice seeing Jackie Sr. back. The whole dynamic of this movie, Vito versus Frank, is basically the same dynamic in Sopranos season 1 of Tony versus Uncle Junior. I mean,
it does feel like Sopranos Many Saints of Newark stuff. It does.
Every beat in this movie was done better in a different movie. I just don't know why this movie was ever made in the first place, except for maybe to give Bob a Dustin Hoffman-esque Tootsie challenge of doing two characters in one. Although you know, to me, it's more like Tilda Swinton in The Eternal Daughter. Like, it's just weird and off-putting and makes there's no reason for it at all, except maybe that Pesci turned down this movie wisely. Like, what's the point? Are these? Yeah, I mean, is there some sort of symbiosis between the characters?
They're two sides of the same coin, kind of. I mean, but they're I don't know. They just went different ways. I mean, he shouldn't have been playing both roles, but it's interesting that he did, especially at a time now, like when he doesn't do that kind of thing. He doesn't take risks in his movies.
I think it's you had Bob, and Bob said, "I can do both," and you say, "Okay."
Yeah,
that was like the best part of the movie is the fact that he was playing both too. So,
well,
it felt like a gimmick at times, but it worked.
Okay, Jim.
That part worked.
A Bob square does not equal a square Bob. SpongeBob SquarePants. I don't know. We need to stop talking about this movie. This movie was really fun to look at the comments of. I'll save some of those for my quote of the day because the people on IMDb. This movie was chalk made for IMDb comments.
All right, well, let's move on then. So Todd and I are at 2.5 stars. Zach is at 1 star. Alto Knights is in theaters. Finished 6th at the box office with not a great total, so won't be around for very long.